welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This morning, a deep dive into lobbying expenses and evidence of pricey perks for many lawmakers. They're enjoying free sporting tickets, tasty meals, and more. All the lobby's dime. Luke Ramseth joins us with his reporting on lobbying gift giving. Also, legal analyst Matt Steffi joins us to talk about Governor Reeves' blast against the Biden administration. COVID-19 misinformation and the right to free speech are at the heart of the conflict. So, how much would you pay to watch your favorite state university's football team in action? Many Mississippi lawmakers don't have to pay a dime, thanks to some generous gifts from the universities themselves. Schools such as Ole Miss and Mississippi State have lobbyists who shower legislators with game tickets, delicious meals, and other pricey gifts. And our next guest reports it's all legal under current law. Luke Ramseth is a Jackson-based journalist covering state government for the Daily Journal. We're glad that he's back here in Studio A. And Luke, welcome back to Mississippi Insight.
Thanks for having me, Byron.
First, let's break down some of the gifts that you're reporting from our lawmakers. According to your report, Senator Rita Potts Parks from Corinth has received 39 gifts since 2019, worth a total of $5,752. That includes a ticket package for last year's Ole Miss football game against Alabama, worth more than $2,200. $550 in tickets for Ole Miss's 2019 game against Arkansas, and a $132 dinner last year, and another meal with her husband valued at $98 a plate. These gifts that I just listed came from a lobbyist from Ole Miss. So look, why should these lobbyists be so generous to Senator Parks?
Well, it's lobbying, I guess, 101, which is, you're trying to get face time with lawmakers and maybe seek some influence for certain priorities that they have. And Senator Parks is the chairwoman of the Senate's Higher Education Committee. So she wields some influence in a realm that, of course, university lobbyists care about.
And she's not the only one receiving these perks, is that correct?
No, yeah, she's just one example, just happened to be kind of the highest example from Northeast Mississippi. Many lawmakers receive some perks, and like we reported, many of those perks are free gift tickets to games, and then a lot of them are also free meals.
Now, Senator Parks, she chairs the Education Committee, I understand, so...
Higher Education Committee,
yeah. So
yeah.
How much influence does that have by giving her those perks?
Well, she just deals with a lot of higher education issues. So those universities obviously, want to make sure she's aware of their top priorities, whether that's projects or other policy issues that they're looking at.
Give us the big picture and how much lobbyists gifts to lawmakers that you find over the last couple of years. How much was it given out?
Yeah, just going back a couple years to 2019, we're looking at almost $100,000 in these individual itemized gifts. And that, again, includes primarily sports tickets. So the universities really give out a lot of free sports tickets. And then a lot of pretty pricey meals as well, but also some other, gifts such as free golf shirts or, occasionally lodging or that kind of thing.
And not all these gifts are well detailed in the filings. Is there a potential legal violation in some of these cases?
I don't want to go that far, but that was an issue that we raised in the reporting, which is that in some cases, two of these universities were often not reporting what they were buying for lawmakers. They were only reporting how much the gift was valued at. Mm-hmm. And so the public has no way of knowing what they're buying. And I should also point out that they're not the only ones doing this. There's other lobbyists that are also sometimes not reporting exactly what they're buying. And one other point to point out is that the universities do usually say that these lobbying expenditures are being covered by their private foundations. That's a little bit hard to confirm, but that's what they say.
You've reported for us for this year that your colleagues found more than $250,000 in university lobbyist gifts between 2015 and 2018. Reminds us what's been happening with the universities themselves since that time.
Not anything that's too different from other state agencies. So they've dealt with a lot of the same budget challenges as other agencies. They've seen steadily rising tuition pretty much across the board over that time. They've also, definitely year over year see some nice benefits in terms of borrowing for new projects. So you know, they're often lobbying to have new dorms, new dining facilities, new classrooms, other projects that they want to see on their campuses.
And what have the universities said about these gifts that you've been reporting on?
Well, actually not much for this most recent story, other than, like I said, they say that private foundations typically cover their lobbying expenses. And that in the past they've said that it's important to you know, get face time with lawmakers, and sometimes games or dinners obviously provide that opportunity.
And there's been some efforts over the past to change the way the lobbying is structured in lobbying laws. What have you reported, and what efforts have been made to make some stricter lobbying laws? Well,
there were not very many regulations at all going back several decades. In the 1990s, the legislature did pass what we have now, which is basically some kind of minimum reporting requirements. So you should be able to see sort of what gifts are being purchased, how much lobbyists are paid, those types of things. Now, what's sort of been proposed over the years since then is sort of following in the footsteps of other states, which would really clamp down, maybe just provide limits to how much total value, say, a lawmaker could get in a year from a lobbyist. You can't have more than, I don't know, $500 or something like that in total gifts. Or many states are actually, an increasing number of states are saying, we don't want to have any gift giving at all in our lobbying sort of, you know, at the Capitol. So those laws are actually called no cup of coffee laws. So they don't want to, you know, kind of have that image of influence at all. So those are two proposals that you've sort of seen floated here before. It's unclear if there's going to be too much of an appetite for them.
And you talked to former Representative John Reeves, who played a role in dealing with some lobbying changes in the past. What do you have to say about what's going on now?
He said that you know, he was glad that reporting that he helped push through back in the 1990s, this sort of bare minimum transparency, is around, but says that, you know, there should be additional reforms. His kind of suggestion was, let's clamp down on the lobbying expenditures. Let's pass one of these no cup of coffee laws. But at the same time, maybe the legislature could increase their salary slightly, increase their per diem slightly, so that they, you know, maybe don't feel the need to go to that free dinner anyway. They've got enough to pay for themselves when they're down here at the session, which can be, you know, a pricey endeavor.
I know one of your articles, you said, one of the representatives said that there's a fine line between a gift and a bribe. Where was that? Where's that
That's
line?
right. Senator Chris McDaniel said that, and you know, I think his point was just that oftentimes it's a bit difficult to tell what's going on. If all you see is this gift, and maybe there's a vote on that issue the next morning, a lawmaker is likely to say, well, of course, I just wanted to meet and talk about the issue. But two, there can be an appearance of impropriety, which is problematic from his point of view.
Earlier in the month, you did some reporting on the ethics fines against some politicians and candidates. What did you find there?
You know, politicians and candidates are required to file campaign finance reports on a regular basis to see who's giving them money and how they're spending it. But we found that often they're not filing those, or they're filing them late, and then in many cases they're not paying the fine. So they can be fined from $50 up to $500, and we found that about $150,000 worth of outstanding fines dating back to 2018 exist due to current politicians or candidates who have not paid their fine for one reason or another. Maybe they haven't received it. Maybe they just don't want to pay it.
Is there a lack of enforcement out there, or what do you think is going on?
There appears to be a lack of enforcement. Yeah, and both the Ethics Commission and the Secretary of State said maybe there's some gaps in the law that could be taken care of there. As it stands now, the Attorney General in the law is supposed to pursue, you know, those outstanding fines, but that's not really happening right now. So there could be some gaps in the law that could be taken care of to maybe recoup some of that money.
All right, Luke Grant, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Byron.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Coming up, law professor Matt Steffi on the push to curb COVID-19 misinformation. It got some pushback last week from Governor Tate Reeves. You're watching Mississippi Insight only on 12 News. Welcome back to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Governor Tate Reeves says a push by the White House to cut down on misinformation about COVID vaccinations is just the kind of thing that would happen in a communist country. The governor cites America's First Amendment protections on free speech. Does that sort of argument pass the legal smell test? 12 News' Chloe Ortega spoke Friday with Matt Steffi. Matt is a professor at the Mississippi College School of Law, and he's a frequent analyst on legal matters on 12 News.
Let me first read what Governor Reeves tweeted on Tuesday. Quote, I believe in the First Amendment and free speech. It's the cornerstone of our country. I support your right to express yourself even if I disagree or if you're factually incorrect. The White House pressuring social media platforms to censor information they deem problematic or misinformation is alarming, especially when some information is later proven to be or could potentially be true. This is un-American. It goes against everything our country was founded on. It's something you find in a communist country or dictatorship. This type of activity is a threat to our democracy. It must stop. So, Matt, does the governor have a fair argument here about First Amendment protections?
No, in a word, no. In fact, the irony of it is that while the earlier part of the governor's remarks expresses support for the ability for people to express themselves, whether he agrees with it or not, he then essentially says that President Biden shouldn't express himself, right? What's critical is this distinction between what President Biden did and the boogeyman in this case, what communist countries do. Communist countries prevent speech they disapprove of from ever getting into print. That's not what President Biden did. Communist countries take over, shut down, or punish companies that publish speech they disapprove of. That's not what President Biden did. Communist countries jail or otherwise punish speakers with whom they disagree. Again, that's not what happened. If this were a communist country and this were speech that the country disagreed with, either no one would hear it, or if they did, the company would be shut down and its leaders put in jail. In fact, what President Biden did is the mirror image of what Governor Reeves did, which is express his opinion on how Facebook should conduct itself. President Biden, under the First Amendment, is entitled to that opinion, just as Governor Reeves is entitled to that opinion. The many cases say that the remedy for bad speech is more speech or good speech. President Biden thought some of the speech on Facebook was so-called bad or incorrect speech. He responded. Governor Reeves found what the president did, bad speech. He responded. All of this is in the tradition of the First Amendment, not just Governor Reeves' part. There's a more complicated element here of what we expect out of publishers. Many of us, showing my age, grew up with print newspapers, and there was a sense that newspapers had journalistic standards and an editorial obligation to check the accuracy of what they printed. There was also kind of a legal threat lurking back that if they published something false and defamatory, they faced liability, even if the false or defamatory statement, say, was in an editorial. That when I publish something, if I have a newspaper, magazine, or internet site, and I let somebody else come on and say something, I'm called publisher of it. There's a special protection for internet companies in Section 2230 of the Communications Decency Act that shields Facebook and other internet publishers from the kind of liability a newspaper would face. So they can kind of be a flow-through for anything, however outrageous or false.
Twitter this week actually blocked Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene for 12 hours. They cited false information that the Congresswoman was spreading about COVID vaccinations and masking. Are we in an age now when media companies will have to walk a fine line between free speech, liberties, and public messaging?
I think we are. I think that's really a complicated question. Back in the days of print journalism, if I wanted to write letter to the editor, have a editorial published, an opinion piece published. I had to sign my name, put my phone number and address. It would go to the newspaper. They would vet it for accuracy. They would call and talk to me about it, and they would decide if it's worthy of publication. One of the beauties of the internet age is that all of us today can have our voice broadcast around the world. But those companies that host us are shielded from liability if they post things that are false, defamatory, or oddly conspiratorial. And so the question is, does that shield come with any responsibility? Does that role come with any responsibility to behave just a little bit more like a newspaper would, to not just be a conduit for statements that are demonstrably false or injurious to third parties? So Facebook and Twitter and other companies like it are so large with so many subscribers, they can't vet every single article. They have AI do that for us. And the prospect of AI evaluating and stopping our speech, it's a little bit frightening, right? It's a little bit concerning that a computer program may decide that my speech needs to be silenced. But there has to be some way forward where a company can't just say, it's not me, and be a conduit for speech that injures other people, the democracy, our public well-being, and being a censor, right? Neither extreme alternative is one that is easy to defend. It's not easy to defend letting the internet be a garbage fire, a dumpster fire of misinformation, right? Letting the internet be or Facebook or Twitter be a dumpster fire of misinformation. That's not acceptable. Letting Twitter or Facebook's AI censor us, that's not acceptable. And I think the next few years, we have to find a way forward. But what's clear is that it is perfectly acceptable for both President Biden and Governor Reeves to have a voice in that, and neither one of them did anything that looks like censorship or the behavior of a communist dictator.
Let's talk about the legal brief that Attorney General Lynn Fitch filed Thursday. It's basically the state's argument as a case over Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban heads to the Supreme Court. Have you had a chance to look over the brief? And if you have, is there anything noteworthy?
I read the brief last night.
Anything noteworthy there?
No, it's exactly what we would expect. Yes, it's noteworthy in the sense that it's a noteworthy case. The brief is pedestrian. The brief suggests in a full-throated way that the court should use this case as an opportunity to overturn Roe versus Wade. And then in a more minor way, it tried to defend its law, saying even if you don't overturn Roe, this 15-week ban should be constitutional. You know, this has been a long-range strategy. As you know, Mississippi has one abortion clinic that does abortions up through 16 weeks, and a slew of annual laws that challenge the right to choose, with the hope that one of those laws will make its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is what's happened. The Supreme Court, by accepting the case, that indicates at least 4 members of the court are likely to want to take the law in a new direction. That could be overturning Roe and giving reproductive rights fully to the hands of the state legislature. Or it could be something more modest, where Roe continues to be assaulted and face death by 1,000 cuts. Chief Justice Roberts has wanted to be more incremental and just limit but not overturn Roe so far. What's changed here is that Roe can be overturned if Justices Kavanaugh and Barrett agree without Chief Justice Roberts. So this is an argument that Roe should be overturned, and if not, this law should be upheld anyway. But this case will really turn on whether there is an appetite among 5 members of the U.S. Supreme Court to give the question of reproductive choice back to state legislatures.
Matt Steffi, thank you very much.
That's Matt Steffi talking with 12 News' Chloe Ortega, and we'll be right back. Our thanks to journalist Luke Ramseth and legal analyst Matt Steffi for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.